things promise love and all things golden for my love. She said, please be kind and load my gun. Please be brave and kill for fun. Don't play with guns, don't play with guns. She said, don't play with guns, don't play with guns.
Real-world people and real-world violence become entangled with the fictionalized versions of themselves in Peter Bogdanovich's debut feature. What makes Target stand out against all the other violent exploitation thrillers of the late 60s and early 70s is how much minuscule detail is put into our two main players. Boris Karloff plays Byron Orlok, an aging character actor from Hollywood's antiquity, who is best known for his iconic movie monster roles. Bogdanovich's script, with help from Polly Platt and Samuel Fuller, is so rich in little moments of characteristic repose that somebody who has never even seen a Karloff movie or know a single detail about his life can still be immediately taken in by Orlok. Even an iconic, internationally famous actor can still feel like a commodity bound by their on-screen image. An image for Orlok that has outlived its expiration date. By the late 60s, many of the biggest stars of the old Hollywood era either were gracefully retired or were relegated to supporting roles for the new bloods. However, for workhorse character actors like Orlok, and of course by extension Karloff, acting is a way of life, a 9-to-5 job that they work until they drop dead. Except whereas his real-life analog did just that, even as he was ravaged with emphysema, Orlok at the start of the film firmly decides to spend the rest of his ailing years in retirement. For the first time in his long storied career, he is able to truly reflect on the legacy he leaves behind. His movie monster persona has become quaint and toothless in the era of the spree shooter and serial killer. The youth of the day know him for the seemingly artless horror he stars in for a penny-pinching B-movie producer, an obvious stand-in for Roger Corman, rather than for the elevated prestige of his Howard Hawks collaborations of the 1930s. You don't necessarily blame the man for wanting to suddenly cut ties with the whole damned industry and flee Hollywood altogether. Yet something draws Orlok back in for one last hurrah, a public appearance at a screening of his final movie, The Terror, an actual Karloff-Corman joint from 1961. In preparation, he's forced into an interview with a local drive-time radio DJ. Sick of answering the same inane questions he's had his entire career, Orlok instead recites An Appointment in Samara, a short retelling of a Mesopotamian tale about death and fate, by Somerset Maugham. Bogdanovich slowly zooms in on Karloff, and before the viewer realizes it, the characters in the scene are not the only audience made captive by him.
Once upon a time, many, many years ago, a rich merchant in Baghdad sent his servant to the marketplace to buy provisions. And after a while the servant came back white-faced and trembling and said, "Master, when I was in the marketplace, I was jostled by a woman in the crowd, and I turned to look, and I saw that it was death that had jostled me. And she looked at me and made a threatening gesture. Oh, master, please lend me your horse that I may ride away from this city and escape my fate. I will ride to Samara, and death will not find me there." So the merchant loaned him the horse, and the servant mounted it and dug his spurs into its flank, and as fast as the horse could gallop, he rode towards Samara. Then the merchant went to the marketplace, and he saw Death standing in the crowd, and he said to her, "Why did you make a threatening gesture to my servant when you saw him this morning?" And Death said, "I made no threatening gesture. That was only a start of surprise. I was astonished to see him here in Baghdad, for I have an appointment with him tonight in Samara."
Actors in their purest form are storytellers. They may not necessarily write the movies they act in, but they wield immense power as the victors of these stories. For a storyteller, there is no greater rush than the high of wrapping an audience around your finger, and Orlok can't resist getting another hit in one final performance in front of a much larger crowd. The irony is that Orlok never gets the chance to actually perform this tale at the screening. Instead, his final act becomes the act in a story in which Bogdanovich has his audience wrapped around his own finger. Bogdanovich hard cuts an appointment in Samara into the film's own personification of death. Bobby Thompson is the other protagonist in the story. An actual monster who doesn't possess the naturally ghoulish look of Orlok. Thompson is not a traumatized, mentally disturbed loner like Ed Kemper or a drugged-out egomaniac like Charles Manson. He has no agenda, no cause, no tragic upbringing, nor recognizable mental illness to give his killings a semblance of sense. He's Bobby, the Golden Boy war veteran, with loving parents, a quiet insurance job, and a gorgeous blonde girlfriend. The production design, courtesy of Polly Platt, paints the Thompson household in the soft pastels synonymous with the conformity of mid-century suburbia. His evil is utterly banal, and that's why it's so terrifying. He also has an obvious real-world counterpart, the University of Texas tower sniper Charles Whitman, whose killings were seemingly senseless aside from an innate urge to kill. Like Orlok entrancing an audience, it's a high that Thompson withholds until he can't help but indulge in it. The way Bogdanovich captures Thompson and his weapons borders on the fetishistic. By the time he has claimed his first batch of victims, the audience has become intimately familiar with his rifles. The loading mechanism, the bolt, the sight adjustment. Bogdanovich can wring a genuinely stressful amount of tension just from the simple close-up of a finger on the trigger. The most chilling scenes in the movie aren't acts of killing, but the banality that precedes and follows them. Thompson's quiet, methodical disposal of his family, or him taking a swig of Pepsi in between shooting random freeway drivers. When the killer and Orlok converge at the drive-in, the movie cleverly cuts between Thompson loading another round into the chamber, and actual film looping through the inner workings of a movie projector, further drawing the comparison between the broad, obvious evil found in fiction, and the unassuming actual evil lurking within American society. But when the two main characters finally come face to face, it's neither climactic nor triumphant. Just an impotent beating of a psycho who's been literally starstruck. There's no stopping the frightening world in which men like Thompson, Oswald, Whitman, and Manson have ushered in. A state of constant, senseless violence emerging from the banality of the white middle class that we've been living in for the past 50 years.
He takes his pills so he can kill. Praise the Bible.